Welcome, everyone, to Shifting the Paradigm, Creating a New Earth. I am Angela Blaha, and my guest expert today is Sarah Shapiro. Is that correct?
Shapiro, yep.
Okay, great. Welcome to the show, Sarah. And today we're going to be talking about your unconscious money story. But before we get into that, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, Sarah?
Absolutely. I just wanted to first thank you for having me on, Angela. It's delightful to connect with you. And I just love this technology that we can get to connect with people from all over the world. It's really spectacular.
Yes.
So, my name is Sarah Elizabeth Shapiro, and I am a millionaire mindset coach. And I'm transitioning my coaching. I have a website called moneymagnets.net. But my story, a little bit about my money story. I'm going to focus mostly on the money story because people here are tuned in to learn about the unconscious money story. But my background is very eclectic and unusual. In my 20s, I went to graduate school for a master's degree in psychology, and I became a psychoanalytic psychotherapist in New York. And I worked with people with anxiety, depression, addictions. And for some reason, and I lived in New York, I worked with a lot of actors and artists. And I really loved it. It was really wonderful. So I had my practice. I was very young. I started at 28 and I had my practice into my mid 40s. So almost 17 years. And, but I noticed a connection that most people really didn't like their work. And they really weren't making enough money and they weren't living from their heart. And so I took a lot of risks and I had my clients work spiritually. I had a very profound spiritual awakening at the age of 32. In a meditation, I began to see auras and chakras in front of people in my training program. And I started using this knowledge. It was downloaded to me from the ancient Vedas. And so I started integrating Eastern and Western psychology. So I used this work with my clients to find out where they were blocked energetically. And I didn't really study it. It just came to me. And those of you who believe in past lives, I was an Indian healer, and this came with me from that lifetime. And I was an untouchable. So I didn't have a great life, but I did have that gift that came with me. So anyway, I helped my clients move out of the careers that they hated, waiting tables or working in offices, and becoming artists. I had a photographer who made $500,000 a year, a commercial photographer, and he wanted to do fine arts, and he was attached to the money, and we worked on it, and he made $200,000 selling fine art prints, and he was okay with that, and he moved and downsized, and nothing made me happier than to help people find their right livelihood. And we worked with their spirit and their soul and their guides to help them find their way. And my personal story, I was a extreme under earner. Now there's three ways we can go with money usually, and we can kind of summarize it with the compulsive, kind of a binge purge spending, compulsive overspending and debting, or under earning and kind of a deprivation mentality. Okay. And so I was a very well-educated young lady in my 20s and went to a good school, blah, blah, blah. On the outside, it looked like I had everything. And my first job out of school, very expensive university, I made $13,500 in the late 80s in New York. Now, you know how far that might go. So I shared a studio apartment with a friend until I was 31. And I had to climb over her dirty pajama couch, looked like dirty striped pajamas, to get to the bathroom. So it was pretty, but it was quite small, and I never really earned enough and lived up to my potential. Even after my master's degree, I went up to $28,000 working with drug addicts in the East Village and was really thrilled about that pay raise and still could barely get by. And I never really questioned it that much. And that was the problem. And after I had a spiritual awakening, and I was very humble. And my consciousness at the time wasn't attached to money, but I really was struggling to pay my rent, to have a vacation, to even, buy a car. And so it really was a problem for me. And I after my spiritual awakening, I was led to a spiritual teacher. She was a Jungian therapist. And within 1 year, we worked through all of my money blocks. And this was also something that was channeled to me I was able to raise my fees. I had a private practice and I charged $50 an hour. I felt undeserving, and that has to do with your third chakra. And it was like terrified, like white knuckling it. And she said, well, you're going to have to raise your prices to like $100 an hour. It was $120 was a going rate in the early 90s. And I said, I can't do that. Like, no one will come to me. And so it really only took about 3 months. She said, just walk through the fear and do it. Mm-hmm. And so we work on our chakras as we take these steps. So I was really, really working on my self-esteem and self-love. But she wasn't really consciously digging into my money story. And that only came later. And I recognized 10 years later that my father was a Harvard-educated lawyer, and he never, ever asked to get paid. He just wouldn't collect fees. And my mother was an artist. It's crazy. And it's great that she never earned any money. So they were under earners. And I didn't recognize this pattern at all until I was almost 40. And so I could have even gone further with that. But as most people know, but everybody has an unconscious money story. And I believe that there's about 12 of them. But you absolutely must know your unique story. And I have a one-off session called a synchronicity session. And in that session, we find out, you just know what your core money story is. And it does start to heal right away. It doesn't mean you'll go from 50,000 to 200,000, but energetically, you are relieved. Because you're sitting on this, everyone is sitting on a story that is inhibiting their abundance. Everyone. Mm-hmm. And you might have done the law of attraction, you might have done affirmations. That's not your unique story. There has to be slight excavation to find that out. And you need either an intuitive or a therapist or someone to help you, because I didn't get my story until I had some help. So things for me skyrocketed, and I don't want to take the whole session on my life, but there's one other thing I want to share is that in my 30s, I learned, for some bizarre reason, my father was an alcoholic. I didn't have this perfect childhood. There was depression in my family, mental health issues. So I worked on that. Mm-hmm. And most healers and most people who have money issues are taught that they're not deserving, that the unconscious messages you don't. And really what money is energy and love. It's symbolic. So we find ways to push money away. Okay, until we really love ourselves. And as we know, everything's about self-love. It all comes down to that. So I'm going to let you ask your questions, Angela. But
so I find it quite interesting, about our money stories and how they are sort of programmed into us, and they're traditional, right? Like the money seems to be one of those components that is just so very traditionally aligned from generation to generation. And so when we talk about the unconscious money story, what's the very first thing that we can do to sort of start to untangle that?
What great question. What I recommend, but keep it very simple, only write out your 3 top money memories of your childhood under the age of 10 and in your journal. And if you're not someone who journals, then you can record it. Mm-hmm. And then the one that gives you the most emotional reaction in your body. If you feel a reaction in your gut or in your heart or in your throat, mm-hmm. that is the core of your story. And you do need someone to help synthesize it. It's like writing a play, right? It's like Shakespeare. But that is the first step. And I work with my clients to write out their stories and give them to me in our first session. And then I do a reading, and I help them find this is the story. This is the core story, because they're all related. And I have some examples if you would like to hear some of them, but that is a fantastic first step, because we know how we feel about money as an adult, but we don't often sit back and say, well, what did my parents do with money? And was there any trauma around money? Did I ever have a birthday I didn't get a birthday present? Did my brother get more money? Were my grandparents overly thrifty? Did we have so much money it was a substitute for love? Like, we ask those kind of general questions, but we need to get down to brass tacks, and that's the first chakra stuff. What happened in the first chakra? That's all about your family, your tribe, and what the unconscious programming, that's where it happens. So we got to dig in there and ask those questions.
Right. So once you dig into that, how do you like? Is there core belief systems or something that you can sort of like align with that first chakra? Of course, first chakra is all about safety and being secure in the world, and
Exactly.
right, and
Exactly.
our money is housed there.
Exactly.
So, like my story is, we were very poor, and so it was almost embarrassing. So, how do you get to the like the very root, the tiny root? Because I'm sure the root is just like one word or
Absolutely.
a
It's one
sentence.
sentence. It's one sentence. Yes. And embarrassing, but I don't want to necessarily use this here, but we could go a little bit further. But there was shame, was there shame around money and embarrassing because other people had more money?
I think I felt shame. I'm not sure that my parents felt shame, but I felt shame.
Okay. Okay. So the core for you would be I I I feel I am not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Money, not having the money if deeply affected your self-esteem and
Mm-hmm.
something shut down. And also, what about the feeling of safety? Did you not feel safe, or was it a more emotional feeling of not being enough in school and things like that socially?
No,
uh,
there was feelings of unsafety because I grew up in an addictive home, so
right,
there's all of
so
that.
all that mixed in, but
Right.
there are really one or two sentences that would come to that, and you need the antidote is not just affirmation, it's also action. So some of the energy around there's never enough,
Mm-hmm.
I won't be provided for,
Mm-hmm.
I am unsafe. And money, when you look out into the world, symbolized abundance and having love and having stuff and having energy around you. And you felt deprived. It was a deprivation and lack consciousness
Mm-hmm.
in your family. And they didn't work on that. When you're in an addictive household, no one really
Right.
is they're not working on expansion. They're not working on abundance.
Right.
But when you find out that core issue, and we could go into that further more privately because I don't want everyone knowing your exact business,
Oh.
but the general, and I can give you some stories of other people on how they dug out of it. But once you know that,
Mm-hmm.
but having money, the other issue for you, and I don't know this for sure for you, but people who have come from families that were very poor and a deprivation consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say most people who win the lottery, 70% of people who win the lottery either spend all the money or lose the money.
Right.
And that's because they're not comfortable. There's many, many reasons, but one core reason is feeling alienated from your group and from your tribe. So even if your people had addictions, your mom, your dad, your siblings,
Mm-hmm.
you loved them. And there's some members of that family that you really loved. So let's say someone all of a sudden cut you a check for $1 million tomorrow. You honestly wouldn't feel, you might feel giddy for a few days, but your unconscious would push that money away because it would make you feel separate. And you'd have to do some work, emotional work, to feel deserving. You build a container in the third chakra to be able to hold that money. And number two, feel safe enough that you won't be completely alone because people will leave you.
Right.
They get very jealous or they will judge you and they'll push you aside. So there's some work that people have to do when they start receiving large sums of money. And people can do it. I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
You go from nothing to multi-billionaire. But you've also seen in the acting world and say the music world, typically there's especially when people come from East New York, Harlem, like the rappers, they have multi-millions and somehow they go bankrupt, they lose it, they have a bad business deal, and that's their unconscious money story pushing it away. And if they did that work, they'd keep the money, and the money could be used to not only help themselves, to help others.
Right.
So
This seems to be like money is a huge issue. I mean, and it's not just for me and 90%.
no, it's
I mean, it's 90% of the
90%
world.
is 90% of the world for sure.
Yeah. So how do we, in creating the new earth, how do we like expel the whole money issue, right? Like, how do we open people up to understanding that money is just energy and it's a relationship, for one thing,
Yes, it
two
is.
things, and that, and what's it going to take for us to like have a good relationship with money? Because in creating the new earth, like it's all about relationships.
Yes, it is. There's a beautiful, beautiful questions, and they're humanitarian questions. And the shift in consciousness is happening.
Yes.
Now, it's, in my view, it's happening incrementally, but look at the internet now. The people who have no money, who live in Africa, who have access to the internet, someone who might be in a schoolhouse and can get to a library. I'm not saying they probably don't have access, but most people in the world do now have available to them these thought forms. By thought forms, I mean, we know spiritually money is energy.
Right.
Money, and we also have to start with the fundamental concept that everyone has to come into a meditation and recognize there's nothing in the physical world that wasn't a thought first. Nothing. These are strips of green paper, and we are assigning meaning to money. And it's kind of funny. They're literally strips of green paper. And money is now created electronically. So it's actually nothing. Like, it's just consciousness moving around.
Right.
So if we can align ourselves, there's many, many things happening, but in my view, I might be a Pollyanna. The internet is fabulous because it's opening people. Usually, in past times, this was mysticism. These concepts were Vedas and locked up, and only a few people in India. You'd have to climb up the Himalayas to figure this all out. And I studied with realized masters, and not in India, from India. So I was very lucky, but everyone has access to this consciousness now. And because we're having these intimate dialogues and you're having a summit, these seeds are being planted, and it's going to change. But the other thing that I believe in very strongly is educating children about money. And there's very few people who do that. And I'm actually creating a program called Mini Magnets for kids, and instead of money magnet, mini magnets, and that's going to take about 3 or 4 months to put together. But there has to be consciousness, even if you're not doing it perfectly. It's very important. Even in the schools, there should be a course in money. But money is a tool, and we have to start with that. It's energy and a tool to help you do what you're here on earth to do. That's all it is. And we project the rest, and we make it very complicated. Because the ego, I think you know about this, we all have a soul mind and an ego mind. The ego is grasping and gripping and comes from a space of lack and needing more. And the ego mind right now in this world is in control, but the soul mind is rising, and that's the new earth. The soul mind knows that we're here for a purpose. We each have a unique fingerprint. We're here to share, and we're all going to have enough money. And the soul knows that money's energy. So I believe that things are shifting right now. Like, you're part of it. So the more summits, the more consciousness, the more awareness, but it's an incremental shift. So I'll give you another metaphor. Say, and you're putting drops of oil on a pool of water, and you drop 3 drops and they float around separately. You make 5 drops, all of a sudden they'll come together and form one mass. Right. That's what happens with consciousness. So that the mass consciousness is going to understand this, but we also, the second piece, is doing the work. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to hire me. You don't need money. You don't have to hire a coach. It is easier and it's faster, but everyone can do their own work. In writing out your money story, meditating on it, and really, really consciously sitting with that truth. It is a truth that money is energy, and it is strips of paper. It is meant for us to share, and there's enough of it to go around. I mean, that's our consciousness, our ego is saying that there isn't enough. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So what happens when we, get our money story and we sort of recognize what the patterns are, or the beliefs or the emotions that are attached to it? Then what? Then what happens?
Great question. So with the actions, there's many things you can do. Should I give you an example of a client?
Yes, please.
Okay. I have a client named, I'm going to, just for anonymity's sake, I'm going to name him Chet. And he is a 41-year-old male. And I started working last summer. I've worked with him for 6 months. And it was really a beautiful, beautiful story and a transformation. And it doesn't always happen like this, but usually it does. Mm-hmm. Because remember, we're working with mind, body, spirit. I'm not a money coach, the same type of money coach working at Fidelity. And I do teach about investments and things like that. But I do all levels, spirit, your emotional body and the physical body. So Chet was 41. He lives in Vancouver. He ran a bricks and mortar marketing business for online companies, but he's not an online entrepreneur. He just helps them do their marketing. And he only made $42,000 a year. And I was shocked. And I did his numbers with him. We do a way to do a budget, a conscious budget and conscious spending. So it's like eating, right? So we have a relationship with our money. And he wasn't in any conscious relationship with his money at all. But he was very, very open. And I asked him, how are you living? And he wrote his budget, and it was very tight. Like, he happened to have a cheap apartment, and he could barely pay his bills, and he was working 48 hours a week, and it was crazy, and he was very, very unhappy. And we got to the root of his money story, and it's actually funny. I'll have to edit one of the words I choose to use. One of his stories, and as I told you in my first session, they pick their top 3 money stories, and then I go into a channeling meditation, and we talk on the phone next after I get the story, and then I put it all together. His most powerful story was that his family owned a greenhouse. His 2 uncles and his father owned a very successful greenhouse in Ontario to sell flowers. And the 2 uncles were multimillionaires, and his father was not. And his father was kicked out of the business. And so my client, Chet, had to wear hand-me-downs. He didn't go to private schools. They drove beat-up cars. And the 2 uncles had like Porsches and, Lexuses and all these things. And this was in the 90s. And Chet was very, very humiliated by this. And the cousins would make fun of him when he'd go to parties. And when he, now as an adult, he remembers wanting to kick their cars. And he said they're all a-holes. And in the story, and he remembers kicking one of their cars at a party. And so now as an adult, when he sees like a Porsche go by or a Lexus or any kind of fancy car, he goes, a-hole, or, the other equivalent of that word. Yeah. And he gets very angry. And I said, Chet, you're really, really angry about wealthy people, aren't you? He goes, well, I wouldn't say wealthy people. I would say my family. And I said, well, I don't think so. I said, this is what it is. This is your formula. If I become wealthy, I am an a-hole. And he laughed his ass off, and so did I. So if I am wealthy, I am an a-hole, and I am them. So he unconsciously blocked himself from any money and to becoming an a-hole. So he'd rather be poor and not an a-hole than wealthy. So I gave him a homework assignment. I gave him many over 6 months. But I said, I want you to pick 10 people in the media, friends, not your family, anyone you know who makes over, say, $500,000 a year, who's a kind person. And he had a hard time thinking about that. And I said, well, do you like Oprah? And he said, yeah, I do. Do you think and he wrote that, and I helped him with his list. Have you heard of Warren Buffett? And he said, yes. I said, do you think he's kind? And he said, yeah, I think he is a good guy. And he picked a couple of actors who are good, and he said, how about you? And I said, yes, me, because I have a lot of investments. I have over $1 million of investments, and that happened because of my work. Mm-hmm. And he said, you're not an a-hole. And I said, well, thank you for saying that. So he did that, and he sat with that, and literally he sat with that, and I said, I want you to meditate on this list. And so he did it every night for a week, and on our next session, he got 3 new clients. He stopped kicking cars and getting angry. Like, he noticed, he said, I'm watching myself, like with jewelry and bling. Like, he just didn't, all of that he wanted to push away. I said, it doesn't mean you have to have these cars.
Right.
He actually did want one. So we worked that through. And so he was blocking himself for 40 years because he didn't want to be an a-hole. So he's now making $90,000 a year, but we went step by step. It does take 6 months, and we talked. He didn't have that much resistance, though. So the resistance literally, in his case, lifted like that just in that moment. It was like the universe just said, okay, we're done. We're lifting that from the root. And he laughed. And so he did do the work. Like, we talked about his fear of raising his fees because he was charging like nothing. He felt sorry for everyone because they were all new entrepreneurs. I said, but could they afford? Are they paying for other things? Because he needed to charge $5,000 for his packages, and he was charging $1,500. So he started raising his fees. So now he's at $90,000 a year. We have a goal of $150 by the end of the year. And by September is when we started working together. And it was only 6 months, but we're still in contact, and it's fabulous. He went away on holiday to Hawaii for the first time. And I taught him how to save. So it's a lot. There's 3 prongs, really. There's the getting your story. There's healing your relationship with money, which has to do with your budgeting and also putting yourself first. And I don't care if you're making $40,000 a year. I say pay yourself first. And that means I don't care if it's $40 a month. You have to put a note somewhere in a bank account. You have to. That's paying yourself. It's energetically putting it towards yourself. And we work on a debt reduction plan, but it's all based on your soul alignment and what works for you. It's symbolic healing for most people because you're not going to make millions saving $40 a month, but it's telling the universe, I'm taking this seriously.
Right.
I take my money seriously and I'm going to pay attention to it and I'm going to have a conscious relationship. And then the third aspect is the daily business piece, which I always recommend the law of 3 actions. Not overwhelming yourself, just 3 actions a day. If you're an internet entrepreneur or a business entrepreneur, and they can be big or small. And that's it. And it's rooting out the story, shifting your consciousness about money, and then working on your business consistently. And most people do it backwards. They work on their business and they buy more stuff, they buy more programs, right?
Yeah.
And they do more marketing, and then they do that other stuff last.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, and it's, that is the relationship, right? When you do it the right way, that is the relationship, and you don't have to work at it.
No. And he plugged
flows
into the budget really carefully. Like I asked him where we could cut. I'll just give you another very specific example. We do a spirit, I call it kind of a magical budget, and we get extra stuff from it. And he was spending $600 a month on eating outside of his home. And also groceries, so it was about $1,000 a month. I said, I want you to try to live on $150 a week on groceries and not eat out. Eat out once a week. I don't want to deprive you. There's no deprivation in my program because he'd like to eat out. It's fun. And he was a single man and it's too hard. So I said, I'm going to give you two days a week. You can eat out at lunch and at dinner. And we came up with the amount, and listen to how crazy this is. So he found this amazing Asian buffet with all-you-can-eat sushi for $20 around the corner from him, and he was spending $40 here and $40, this unconscious relationship, getting sake, treating himself. And they actually had a sake night where the sake was $4, so he could go out for $22 actually and have all the sushi he wanted with a sake, and that was his once-a-week treat. He didn't feel deprived, and then he had a lunch buffet, and he said that was enough to bring for dinner. It was a Middle Eastern restaurant. So he said, I had like these, and even the sushi was enough for just, you were even allowed to take it. So all these little magical things started happening, and the money expanded. So he said, I can't spend $150 a week on food. I'm like, well, if you want to get out of your this deprivation mentality, you're going to have to. But as I said, there was no deprivation. And he felt that. He said, wow, this is crazy. And then he ended up with $100 a month to save, and he started putting it, he liked stocks. So he started investing. So it sounds really nutty, but this is a guy who made $41,000 a year. So that's not starting with a lot.
Right.
So there's these little mystical, and the universe comes right behind you, and I'm sure you've had that experience. Mm-hmm. When you decide to make that shift, you will be supported, and there's magic that happens.
Right. So have you ever seen a soul that literally comes in, because I have clients that believe this, that literally comes in and says, you have to lead a life of poverty, or you have to live in, with nothing? Have you ever seen a soul that actually
I've heard of this.
Made that contract?
No, I don't believe in it. I don't believe that the universe wants us to be in deprivation. I do believe that some souls might have been a monk in a past life or a nun. I've heard this before from a lot of Akashic record readers, which explains part of their deprivation, but I think it's this life. I don't think I say God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, the energy of love, that's what I call it.
Right.
No, there's no punishment, there's no deprivation. We choose all of that. There are natural disasters, don't get me wrong, but that's all about healing and balancing. 90% of the stuff that goes on is ego choice. Absolutely not. The universe wants us to be abundant, to thrive, to grow. No. Yeah. But that's just a hair shirt. That's some kind of shit that they learned, excuse my language, in their childhood, and it's too hard for them to feel that.
Right.
I think it's impossible. I mean, that they came in with that contract. I don't believe it.
I don't believe it either. And I'm an Akashic reader, and I've never actually seen that. The people who come in as who wanting to live those, those kind of lifestyles
Yep.
that are, they're abundant lifestyles. They don't believe that there's lack.
But you can come in and say, I'm a yogi and live
Yeah.
in an ashram and not have clothing and food. But there is, of course, if you have friendship and energy and love and the ocean, that's abundant. I might make that choice. Who knows?
Exactly. But they don't believe in that there is lack. So
No.
so that still is not that whole paradigm. Anyway, I just had to ask that question.
Of course, absolutely
Somebody
not.
needed to hear that. I don't know.
I agree with you. No, that's an ego decision that is made. It's not coming from your soul.
I agree. Okay, Sarah. So what else would you like to leave with our listeners?
So I would like to leave you guys with 3 things. Number 1, really, really think about tonight, if you have a moment. Just meditate on this. Every single thing that's in your home, in your life, was a thought. It didn't exist. Even someone, like, let's say the early, primitive man, let's say they thought of a chair. A rock was there, and someone said, let's put legs on that chair and make it work out. Who knows? Raise it up. So we've got to have a kind of lightness and a curiosity and a very huge openness in our consciousness about what money is and things and stuff and how that happens. We have to open up, number 1, to that. Number 2, money is energy and it's endless. There's enough for everyone. And number 3, work on your money story. And just, if you want to take an hour, just write down those 3 top stories, meditate on that, and if you feel stuck, you can go onto my website and moneymagnets.net, or make an appointment. If you're not stuck, that's fine. I don't need the business, to be totally honest. I have a lot of other businesses, but or ask a friend, meditate on it, and get to your core money issue. And once you do that, you're going to see the energy shift. And as I said in the talk, there are steps to take after that, and you can listen again and follow those steps. And if you follow those steps, something absolutely will shift. The universe is here to support us. It absolutely will.
Yes. I think that's probably the biggest message, I think, in creating the new earth is to trust that we are always supported, no matter what.
Always supported.
Yeah.
In our darkest times. And it takes a shift and a thought. But remember, it has to be your thought, unique to you. And that's why sometimes people get stuck in law of attraction, because it's sometimes too generic. It's not my heart, my home, what happened to me. So, but the universe is here. It's loving. It wants to give us energy. Look at the ocean.
Yes.
Look at the leaves on the trees. Like, if you really feel lack, you really have to spend a moment just sitting under a huge tree, an old 100-year-old tree. Could you count all those leaves? Probably not, right? And that's abundant, and that's nature.
Yes.
And the universe wants to give to us.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being this beautiful light of healing for our money and for our relationship with money. So all the viewers out there, Sarah's information is attached in this email and attached to this video. So check her out, look her up, give her a call, give her some questions. You send her questions.
Thank you so much, Angela. It was delightful talking to you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Good day.
Bye.